1039 LI News Radio presents Meet the Candidates with Jay Oliver.
And welcome to Meet the Candidates, 1039 LI News Radio. We have the distinct pleasure of having Ed Romaine here. Ed vying for re-election in Brookhaven Township as the supervisor. And Ed, we welcome you wholeheartedly here.
Well, it's great to be here, Jay.
It's great having you. And you and I go way back. I mean, I remember you as a county clerk.
Right, and before that, a county legislator in the 80s. So I've been around for a while.
And I remember, or I shouldn't say I remember, but reading about it, that you kind of were the chief economic development person as far as getting things going in Brookhaven. But county clerk, and I remember you as a county legislator as well.
Right.
And you kind of go a little bit full circle here. Supervisor.
Come back to the town of Brookhaven, absolutely.
Special election last November, and here you go for 2 years now vying for a spot.
Special election, I was very content being a county legislator. I loved it. I represented all of Eastern Brookhaven from Sound to Bay, as well as the towns of Riverhead, Southold, and Shelter Island. It was a great district. Think about the district all the time and the wonderful people I met there. But as you know, our former supervisor, Mark Lesko, resigned midterm to take a job in private sector. And it created an opening, and a number of people approached me about running, and I thought long and hard, but I'm towards the end of my career. Not at the end, but towards the end. And I said, you know what? It's probably a good time to be supervisor because you're not thinking about what the next spot is or the next thing. You're thinking about making it work no matter how difficult it is. And making it work, there's a real easy secret of success. It's just listening to your council people, listening to the people, trying to find common ground.
But and you're like the quarterback of the team. I kind of look at it that way. And a supervisor is also kind of the top fiscal officer, top administrator.
Right. Actually, I'm not the chief executive officer. That title I share with my 6 board members.
Okay.
But I am the chief fiscal officer for the town. So I've worked over the last year to do one thing. To show the board members I'm not going to be throwing grenades, I'm not going to be taking shots, cheap or otherwise, and that they can do that. And they did that when I first got there, because that was the way. Brookhaven has been a very contentious town. And I just turned down the volume. And at some point, people began to realize, he's not taking shots at me, and some of the things he's saying make sense. And I began to find unanimity amongst the board that was divided 3-3. We had 3 people on one side of the aisle, 3 on the other, and the board was a very contentious board. They had rejected Mr. Lesko's plan to save the Commons River. His budget was extremely contentious. It laid off a lot of people. There was a lot of unhappiness, and at the end of the day, he left. And every board member voted against that budget. But it went totally into effect because none of them could reach to 4 to amend it. So we were left with a less than desirable budget. There was a tremendous degree of unhappiness. This year we've done a lot of things on a unanimous basis. We passed the Commons River Plan on a unanimous basis. My budget, which I put forward for 2014, will be passed unanimously. It freezes taxes, it lowers debt, which was a real problem in Brookhaven town.
And no layoffs too, right?
No layoffs and no cuts in service, and it does all of those things. And it puts $10 million aside for open space preservation. And the opposite party is frustrated because they can't find a way to criticize it. In fact, they're all going to vote for it.
I want to go back a little bit. We'll talk about the 14 budget, the whole thing.
Yeah.
You have 30 plus years in the county as far as public service is concerned. Tell the audience, what kind of changes, what are some of the major changes you have seen from way back then to what you have right now? What are some of the major changes you see, not only in maybe the demeanor
Well,
of
the demeanor,
residents?
I will tell you this, the demeanor in government has become, while it's become competitive, it's also become, I don't want to use the word nasty, but not as friendly as it used to be. I see that in Washington, and I see that everywhere. I'm concerned about partisan politics. I got to tell you, I'm a registered Republican, but I was in despair over the Republicans shutting down government. You know, I'm not a
Who
fan.
would have thunk?
Yeah, well, I'm not a fan of Obamacare. It has its problems, but guess what? It passed.
Yeah.
Unless you have the votes to overturn it, don't do nonsense.
Right.
You can complain about how it's being implemented. You can work to try to improve it. You have a lot of options, but shutting down government should not have been one of them.
A lot of bickering between the parties and
Right.
not really thinking about the people, kind of.
You've got to find common purpose. And it's easier to do on a town level because we're less philosophical. At the national level, you're debating great philosophies over which way the ship of state should steer. The town is providing basic services. It's doing the things that are right. I put forward a land intensification plan that passed unanimously. And what it said is if you get a zoning to develop some land more intensively, there was a formula that you must follow, and you must provide money so that the town can preserve land elsewhere. So if you develop here, you must preserve there, so that there is a balance, because I do not want to see Brookhaven look like Queens. I do not want to see overdevelopment. And I also learned a very good lesson. Everyone thinks development is helpful for the tax base. It is, to a point, and then it begins to drain the tax base. If development is so good, Babylon should have the lowest taxes. It doesn't. And Southold should have the highest. It doesn't. It has the lowest, Southold and Shelter Island.
Right.
So my view is we have a lot of development in Brookhaven Town. We're the largest town in the state of New York by size and second by population with 500,000 people. We want to make sure that there's a balance between our environment and our economy. We don't want to see overdevelopment. We want to have a balance, and I'm working towards that with my board members.
Yeah, and you know, preserving open space is vital. I mean, we've seen this over the years. Let's go back to the taxes situation as part of your 2014 budget. Mm-hmm. Holding the line, no layoffs, no increased debt. Obviously, a major issue with residents, property taxes in general. Mm-hmm. Can it be done? Can it be done to kind of hold the line in that area? Because we get it every year. We get that question.
We froze our taxes. We have 6 funds in Brookhaven, including 2 highway funds. We froze our taxes across all 6 funds. It's looking to use technology and efficiencies to hold the line on taxes. So, for example, one of the things that I noticed when I came into office is every day I would walk in, the first thing you see in the lobby is a long line for people looking to get building permits and this and that. I said, this is crazy. So we've designed a permit renewal, because many of these are permit renewals and nothing's changed. You're just renewing your permit, so that you can do a permit renewal online. And that's going into effect beginning January 1st. So those lines should diminish greatly. We're also doing a mail-in for permit renewals. So that will make it much easier. More than, I'd say, 60-70% of the permits are permit renewals. So you're looking at ways to redesign the workflow in Brookhaven Town, and we need to do that.
You know, when I look at the county overall, and Steve Bellone going through this whole deficit situation, and he's relying a lot on the Foley nursing home as part of the sale to really slice this thing.
Well, they're saying now, he's predicting, he put in his budget that they get $17 million. Budget review is saying $11 million.
Is it wise to do that?
And all I would tell you is that Steve Levy had a proposal to sell it for $36 million. So, and Bellone even had a proposal to sell it for $23 million. He failed to rally the legislature, despite the fact Democrats hold a 13-5 edge in the legislature. So something isn't working. Right now, the problem is the building is sitting vacant. Mold and other things happen when buildings are vacant.
Sure.
And you still have to have security guards, and you still have to maintain the property, so the expense is down, and you're not getting the funding from the federal government to pay for the patients, because that was almost 100% Medicaid. So I don't know. The one thing that they did do is they lost the nursing home license, which is worth $2 or $3 million
right.
when they close that down. You can't get that license back, and the state isn't giving too many new nursing home licenses out. They're very valuable, right. Which was a shame. And the other thing is, when you deal with a developer, just understand that building has no zoning because it was a government building.
Sure.
You'd have to come in and seek zoning.
Right. So in essence, it's
And a height
it's a big
variance.
undertaking.
Oh, yeah. Well, so we're willing to work with the county, providing they have a good reuse plan. We're absolutely willing to work because although I was a supporter because I sat next to John J. Foley in the legislature. He was District 3, he was District 2 at the time, and that nursing home was in my first district, not my second.
Okay.
I didn't move, lines all changed.
Right.
But
You're aware of that whole situation.
absolutely.
We are almost at the anniversary of Sandy, and we had a whole thing with LIPA. I know you were very instrumental in this whole LIPA Oversight Commission. And, you know, if we get another one, are you confident?
I'm not confident at all. I am not confident at all. And I'm praying to God. And as we speak, we're almost at the end of October, and it does not appear that a hurricane is on the horizon, and I'm thanking God every day because I don't think Long Island could sustain another major hit. We had a minor hit with Irene and a major hit with Sandy. I came into office at the very beginning of December after the election in November. Sandy had already hit, and I spent my first 2 months doing nothing else but dealing with Sandy, FEMA reimbursements, and touring Fire Island, touring areas that had been hard hit, and determining how we were going to get assistance. So that was it was a huge problem. We're still dealing with the outfall from Sandy. This is going to go on for another 6 to 12 months before we finally wind down the efforts.
And people are still displaced. You have to hope, like you said, we never see the likes of anything like that anymore.
Well, we are less prepared than we ever can be because the main island, which most of us live on, was protected by a barrier island.
Right.
I remember walking in December, and we got in
Total devastation.
well, devastation for all the communities in Brookhaven. But I went from Smith Point east to Moriches Inlet, it's about 6 miles. It was almost as flat as a board between the ocean and the bay. All the dunes, and that's also true west, all the dunes in that area had been blown into the bay. They were all clogging the bay, shoaling all of the tributaries of the bay. Ask the boaters.
Yep.
But there is no dunes. Until those dunes are rebuilt, and we're asking FEMA for 12 to 15 foot height, we recommend a 15-foot height, we will have no protection from a storm. That storm will flood. And you ask the people in Mastic Beach, because they're right across, just a little east of Smith Point Beach. When there were heavy tides and winds, the water would wash over into the bay and they'd see flooding. If we got hit with a storm, a lot of the South Shore would be flooded out.
It's incredible, and hopefully, like we said, we'll never see the likes of anything like that.
Oh.
One of the things that concerns me, Ed, is I see a lot of young people leaving Long Island. And I know that through economic development and investments, a lot of money was brought in, a lot of jobs as well, which is a great thing. Where do we stand on that right now? Do you see things getting a lot better? Is it a slow situation?
I think things are getting a little bit better. They tell me in the 10 months, because I asked, obviously, for that, because people want to know what you've done. We had about 3,000 jobs created and about $300 million of investment in Brookhaven Town since January. And I thought, wow, that's phenomenal. But when you think about the amount of effort, money, and federal dollars that came in because of FEMA and everything else, that was a short-term boost in the arm. We've got to build on that. We're targeting pharmaceutical industry. Amneal Pharmaceutical is going to have the largest building built in Brookhaven Town. It will create hundreds of jobs and should be opening next year. So we're very optimistic there, and they're going to add on after that because they've already asked us about that. We have a number of other industries. Amos's Famous Cookies have decided to consolidate all their effort in our industrial park in East Yaphank or North Shirley, whatever you want to call it, over there right off William Floyd Parkway. So we see a lot of things. Do I think the economy's getting better? Yes. Our problem is it's only getting marginally better. And the hole we dug in 2008 was a very deep hole. And there was a lot of decisions made then, and I understand why they were made, and I don't want to be critical of anyone, with the stimulus money. But I felt much more of that stimulus money should have gone into infrastructure. So at the end of the day, when you spent your money, you had something you could point to that was solid and concrete. And construction jobs happen, local construction jobs from infrastructure improvement. And you ask any economist and they'll tell you the best way to increase a nation's productivity is through infrastructure improvement. Improving the grid system, your sewer systems, your water systems, your roads, your bridges, your tunnels, things of that nature, your electric grid. We did not, in my personal opinion, make enough of an investment in things that after we invested in, we would have something to show for, and that would have created a lot of local jobs.
Is Brookhaven Rail, where do we stand on that? Because they're doing massive construction there.
Right.
On Route 101.
Yes.
Where do we stand on that right now?
Well, Brookhaven Rail, as you know.
And I would assume that's going to be a major piece.
Well, that's a major piece, but they're claiming they're exempt from all town laws because they're a federal railroad.
Okay.
And my predecessor litigated that matter and settled it, took $1 million and settled it. So our ability to be involved with all of that development, we're waiting to see what's coming. They built 2 temporary large, which you can see right from the expressway at exit 66, large storage buildings for construction material that they're bringing in. I've always believed that rail has the ability to relieve all highways and to lower costs in terms of shipping. How Brookhaven Rail develops, I obviously, as town supervisor, want a much larger role in. I want to take a look at their building standards, their fire safety, their architectural design, their layout of their site plan. I want to take a look at how they're mitigating the clearing that they've done. And I particularly want to make sure that they're not sand mining.
That's obviously a very point of contention. If
well,
that
they are
is the
sand
case.
mining. They sand mined in the first place.
Yeah.
And they claimed that town regulations regarding sand mining did not apply because they were a federal agency. I understand that when they had to bring it down to grade, and there's a number of other things that they did. All of that I understand, but I would like to have a larger role as a town in that, and I also think the DEC should have a much larger role in that.
One of the other things we hear about all the time, I had 3 kids in the school system, out, thank goodness. But drug awareness I think is huge, and education. I know this week is what they call the Red Ribbon Week. Tell us about that a little.
Red Ribbon Week is a week where we raise everyone's awareness about the increasing drug use that we see, particularly heroin. And we see it all over the place. I just had a conference on gangs, in which the DA came, and Suffolk County Police, the corrections deputy sheriffs, local community organizations, particularly from the North Belport area, came to talk about gang activity in Brookhaven Town, because we have gang activity and we're trying to close this down and find constructive alternatives. But coupled with that came the issue of drugs. I have found that drugs are far more pervasive than what people think. Red Ribbon Week is to make people aware of this. This is, in many ways, a scourge on our land, because you take drugs, you're not on the top of your game. I mean, I need a little coffee to get on the top of my game.
A little jolt of caffeine every once in a
to
while,
wake
yeah.
me up. But I got to tell you, people taking drugs,
Yeah.
they get addicted in many cases. They make foolish decisions. They harm society. They put a dent into our economy. They don't have functional relationships with friends, spouses, whoever, children. It's not a good thing. And we're going to do everything we can, particularly with our youth. And we have an active youth bureau to get in there to prevent a spread of drug abuse. And we are seeing more and more of it. And it's concerning me as a supervisor.
It's out there, and,
Right.
and you can't mask it, and that's the key right there. A lot of people come up to me regarding, we know there's a high foreclosure rate in the
Yes.
county, and we know there are a lot of dilapidated homes. We know there are a lot of absentee landlords. And I think it's a good thing now, from what I've read, that banks now are being forced to say, hey, we're going to fix up these homes and preserve these pristine neighborhoods out there. And I know you were very concerned about that.
Most of these banks, particularly the large ones,
Right.
The Chase, the Wells Fargo, the Citibank, I could go on and on, have written these off as losers, off their spreadsheet. This is gone. But you don't see them recirculating it back into use. And what we found in Brookhaven Town, far too often, that many of these homes that are foreclosed aren't boarded up. The town has to do it and charge back the taxes. And we have to go, before we can go on someone's property, we have to pass a resolution to do that. And it takes time and it takes effort. And we go on and mow the lawn. And what we find is that these banks are not maintaining these properties. We will be passing, on the October 29th meeting, a vacant building registry. And by the way, it applies to industrial and commercial buildings as well as residential. And what it says, if a building has been vacant for a long period of time, the owner of that building, or whoever, must register with the town. And in registering, they must provide the name, address, and contact information of the person that's going to be personally responsible for maintaining that property. We're not going looking for who it is. We want to know who's responsible. And they are going to have to indicate that they will maintain that property. When they don't,
Penalties and fines?
we will have penalties and fines, and then we will go on to that property. Again, we're a government. Governments should not go on to private property without some very good cause. So we have to have a public hearing. We have, time gets involved. We have to demonstrate for the record that the property has been neglected, and then we go on. And all we do when we go on is we either board up and secure the property and or cut the grass. But if you get your grass cut by Brookhaven Town, it's $400, $500 because of the paperwork involved, because of the salaries of the people, the trucks, the gas, and so forth and so on. So it's not only the fine that you'll face, but we'll have to go in there and do that.
And I think, also a lot of neighbors that I know who have these homes in their area, they're actually doing the lawns themselves.
They are, and I'll tell you why.
And that's a good thing.
If you have a foreclosed property, and there's 10 houses on that block, and one of them's foreclosed, the other 9 just lost 10 to 20% of their value. So if that house is worth $300,000, now it's maybe only worth $270, because who's going to buy with a ramshackled house?
Exactly.
I visited.
Values go down for everyone.
I visited this neighborhood in Coram. They've got 15 foreclosures within this neighborhood of maybe 70 homes. They're hurting. They needed help. That's where I had my press conference where we announced the initiative for this vacant home registry.
Ed, you took a lot of flack last February.
I know what you're going to talk about.
Listen, we had a snowstorm.
Right.
It was a blizzard, and you were away.
I was away.
Okay?
Right.
So as you get close to election time
Right.
here, is there something in your mind where, it says, boy, I just hope people look at the issues here? Or do you think do you think there'll be any carryover as far as that's concerned?
I'm sure there'll be some carryover. I'm not the highway superintendent of the town. In a town like Brookhaven, we elect a separate highway superintendent. But last year, or this past February, it was the perfect storm. I had a long time planned vacation. I left several days before the snowstorm, and it wasn't at that point threatened to be more than 6 inches, which I figured the town could handle, which we had in the past. I left. The storm got worse. I called in. They said they had it under control, and finally by Sunday they admitted they didn't. I came back a day or two earlier from my vacation, but that didn't make any difference because we had a highway superintendent that had left also. Not only did Mr. Lesko left, but Mr. Rouse, the 9-year highway superintendent, left to become a judge in January, and we didn't schedule an election till March. We're going to change that. We're going to make sure that we follow the county, that we schedule elections much sooner so a vacant post like that doesn't stay vacant. The person that Mr. Rouse appointed, because the town board doesn't, we don't have direct control over the highway department. The person that Mr. Rouse appointed really wasn't up to the job. And he himself acknowledged that and resigned because of the performance of the highway department during the storm. We found out a lot of things, because let me tell you, the one thing you learn in a long life is that failure teaches far more than success. People accept success. Failure, they analyze. And one of the things that we learned is, number one, the rates that we pay for heavy-duty equipment, the type of equipment we needed for a 33-inch blizzard, were not competitive. The 4 towns around us, Smithtown, Islip, Riverhead, and Southampton, paid far more than we did. So guess where all the vendors went? And the county paid even more than that. So the first thing we did is change our rates for heavy equipment. So if we need heavy equipment for blizzard conditions, we'll have it. The second thing we realized is that the fleet under Mr. Rouse, particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, wasn't getting the funding they needed. A lot of the equipment was outdated, rusted, and not doing well. We just bought 12 heavy-duty trucks, very heavy-duty trucks. These are the big ones, and that could move anything for the town highway department. And we are continuing to buy additional equipment. The other thing that we have a new highway superintendent now, Dan LaSquadro. The one thing that he's invested in is an electronic tracking system. So there's a grid with a map of every road in Brookhaven. He can trace when a road is plowed and understand by looking at one map where the problem areas are, which we did not have before. Dan LaSquadro, our new highway superintendent, is doing a great job using technology, purchasing new equipment, and changing the rates for outside contractors that will help us through the next storm. And we've had many discussions about how we are prepared. And in a way, I never wish for snow, but if it comes, we want to demonstrate to Brookhaven we're ready.
Well, listen, a little is good, not 31 inches.
No.
I know I had a shovel that morning.
I know.
Not good. Ed Romaine vying
Yes.
for the supervisor's spot, re-election on the Republican side in the town of Brookhaven. We can't thank you enough for being here.
Jay, thank you.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it.
And for 103.9 LI News Radio, meet the candidates. Have a great day.